Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, Danny Carroll, who's here to share with us his new book, Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis. Discover a palliative care alternative medicine that you can survive. Please note, this book is not for everyone. If you believe that the foundation principles of conventional medicine are beyond question, and if you have conviction that chemotherapy, surgery, and radiation are the only possible treatments for cancer, then this book is not for you. So Danny Carroll spent the first half of his life in London, UK, and completed his education with a master's degree from the London School of Economics. He later moved to India, where he now lives and works, and has spent the last 17 years studying alternative health therapies in search of the golden grail of health and wellness. Following a cathartic healing experience in 2012, he has focused on mind-body healing protocols for the last 10 years. Danny discovered a new body of medical knowledge called Dramatic Healing Knowledge, or Dramatic New Medicine, developed in Germany by Dr. Hammer. Danny has spent the last 7 years using this practice to help people with chronic and terminal health conditions. So let's welcome to the show, Danny Carroll.
Thank you, Marianne. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, what an honor it is to have you here again and to talk about your bestseller. Congratulations. I've heard that it's made bestseller on 5 different lists.
It has indeed, yes, in like a 2-week period, which is, it's extraordinary. I couldn't have asked for more, frankly.
Oh my goodness. Between that and all the rave reviews that people are leaving, it sounds like this is making such a huge impact.
Yeah, I'm not used to people reviewing my work like this. So a lot of their reviews are still giving me goosebumps. So I'm really delighted with the response.
Well, congratulations. And I know we had so much to continue in our discussion from last time. I did want to kind of start with something that really kind of had my interest piqued, because we've had a discussion. You told me about how this approach is different from regular medicine or even alternative medicine. I'd love for you to share how that is.
But yeah, so I've over the last nearly 2 decades, I've studied all forms of both conventional and many forms of alternative medicine, and I apply the same principles to problem solving in health that I essentially apply in business, and that's that. I mentioned this in our last interview that the critical thing is when understanding a problem is to understand the input, the process, and the output. If you're only looking at the output of a problem, i.e., the symptom of a problem, then you're never going to solve it because the problem will just keep coming back. So when I studied various healing modalities, the first thing that I would analyze is whether the modality would essentially identify the root cause of the problem. In business, we can only permanently solve problems if we study the root cause. And what I discovered, Marianne, which was actually quite surprising at the time, is that all forms of healing modalities, or at least all forms that I studied, are all forms of symptomatic treatment. So whilst everybody sort of points the finger at conventional medicine, saying it's a system of symptomatic treatment, which is absolutely correct, what people don't realize is that many alternative modalities are also systems of symptomatic treatment. So if you look at nutritional healing focuses on detoxing the body. The body is the environment of the symptom. I studied Bach flower remedies for many years, which is an English emotional healing system. And basically, in the Bach flower remedies, you're addressing the symptom of the emotion. And the more I looked into different modalities, the more I discovered that they're essentially all systems of the modality that I've now spent the last 10 years studying, called Germanic healing knowledge, is the only modality that I've managed to discover that identifies the root cause of the health issue, and literally identifies the root cause with a sniper's rifle. So as soon as I discovered this modality, I mean, I've not moved on from it, right? I mean, I've spent 10 years studying it because it's the only system of healing that I've been able to discover that essentially identifies the root cause of the problem. Now, in health terms, when we look at what we call input, process, and output, as far as we are concerned, i.e., the human race, the input is a life event, and that can be a crisis, it can be an emotional trauma, it can be an unexpected event that happens in your life, it can be an ongoing challenge that you're facing in your life. And this is the input, or the root cause of what triggers our health challenges. Now, the processing happens in the brain. So my teacher, who was a traditional medical doctor who specialized, he was what we call an internist, which means he specialized in research, and his particular specialization was cancer research. What he discovered is that if you take a brain CT scan, a computer tomography scan of the brain, you can tell somebody's entire life history from their brain, including what problems they currently have and historically the problems they've had. It's like a complete life map that's printed on our brain. And organs, whether that's internal organs or external organs, effectively are the symptom of the problem. So the problem that we have with our healing modalities fundamentally today is that, I mean, if you look at the conventional medicine industry, you know, we have an eye specialist and a cancer specialist and a gynecologist, and every part of the biology has been carved into small pieces, but each modality has been given only the symptoms to deal with. You cannot solve the problem at the organ level because it's only the symptoms. So even if you manage to address the symptoms, if you haven't solved the cause of the problem, then the problem will keep returning. And the way we have carved up the medical industry, unfortunately, I mean, it sets doctors up to fail before they've started, because they're only addressing the symptom of the problem and not the cause of the problem. So this healing modality, Germanic healing knowledge, basically teaches us how to understand and identify the cause of the problem, so that we can solve problems permanently. And this is the major difference between this healing modality and not only other alternative modalities, but essentially all modalities, because it's the only modality, at least that I've been able to find so far, that successfully identifies the very specific cause of the problem, which once you understand the cause of a problem, you then have a chance of being able to solve it.
I find that absolutely fascinating. And it's interesting if we break it down to when you talk about medical science kind of just treating, you know, the symptoms that come up, that can even mean cancer, right?
Especially, I mean, that means all health, and it means cancer, it means rheumatoid arthritis, it means Parkinson's disease, it means schizophrenia and bipolar, and it means Down syndrome, and it means all of the health challenges that we face all have a very specific cause, and you cannot permanently solve those problems until you address the cause. So, I mean, even breast cancer. I mean, we have something called recurrent breast cancer, which is basically if a woman has had a mastectomy and she's had her breast removed. Recurrent breast cancer basically is where you get cancer on a breast that's no longer there. So the cancer comes back even though the organ is no longer there, because the organ doesn't need to be there. The processing, all of these biological programs run in your brain. And if you want to solve a problem by addressing the issue at an organ level, the only option really available to you to assure that the problem doesn't come back is to cut your head off. And that's far from ideal. I mean, if you look at there's a concept in medicine that's called phantom limb pain. Okay, now this is basically a concept where after you've had a limb or an organ amputated, i.e. removed, so you have a problem in your foot or leg and you have your leg cut off from above or below the knee, or you have the entire leg cut off, gangrene or things like that, then the patient can, I think there was a Cleveland Clinic did a study on phantom limb pain, where 8 out of 10 people who have limbs removed still experience pain in the limb after it's no longer there. So they have the limb removed. So you have your leg cut off, but you still feel the pain in your leg after it's gone. And the reason for this is because the pain is actually not in the leg. The pain is in the brain. The biological program, the processing happens in the brain, not in the organ. So it doesn't actually matter whether the organ is still there or not. There's every chance that if the biological program is still running, you will still experience the pain. And this is also for internal organs. So if you have crippling stomach cramps or colon cramps because you've got IBS or ulcerative colitis, you can have your colon removed, but still get colon cramps after the colon's been removed, because it doesn't matter whether the organ is still there or not. The processing and the pain happens in the brain and not in the organ. So it is absolutely pointless having it removed.
So I think one thing that I really want to hone in on is when people look at things like cancer, Parkinson's disease, I mean, you name it, those are actually symptoms of something else.
Everything, every change that we experience in our biology is a symptom. Every change without exception. And that's whether we get eczema on our skin, or we get ulcerative colitis, or we get cancer, or we get rheumatoid arthritis, or any of these conditions basically are all symptoms. Now, what my teacher, a German doctor called Dr. Richard Geert Hummer, in his life, he was diagnosed with testicular and stomach cancer 2 months after his 19-year-old son was shot and murdered. And he couldn't help thinking that there must be a connection between, otherwise he was in his late 40s, he was a healthy guy, and all of a sudden 2 months after his son is shot and murdered, he gets a rare, fast-growing tumor on his testicle. So he didn't know it. He was a traditional medical doctor, so he didn't know at the time. But so he had his testicle removed and part of his stomach removed. But what he later discovered is that it's not the solution to the problem. The tumor on his testicle, he discovered, was functional tissue, and it had a biological purpose. And the purpose was to increase his sperm and testosterone production in order to increase his capacity and increase his fertility, so that he had a greater capacity to get his wife pregnant in order to be able to replace the child he just lost. And what, after 39 years of medical research, with working with over 50,000 patients in the course of his life, what he discovered is that all changes in our biology are all part of an overall survival program. Nature wants us to survive. In his case, his survival program basically increased his capacity, his fertility, and the size of his testicle in order to be able to help him survive by replacing the child he'd just lost. And when you understand the fundamental, the big picture behind how and why biological changes happen, what their purpose are, and what life events trigger these type of changes in our biology, it all sort of starts to make sense.
I would agree with you on that. Why do you think that Dr. Hammer's work and other people who have followed this have had such a difficult time within the healthcare community?
I mean, if you look back in history, Marianne, I mean, this is no exception, right? I mean, I remember reading a case study in the 1900s about a surgeon who felt that it was important to wash your hands before doing surgery, and in a trial, basically discovered that both the infection rates, the survival rates, etc., of the patients that he was operating on had much better outcomes when he washed his hands before he went into surgery. I believe, if I remember rightly, that doctor was either thrown in prison or a mental institution for having the audacity to suggest that it was a good idea to have clean hands when you're operating on people. So my assessment of this, basically, I mean, change is difficult, and nobody likes change, and nobody particularly likes cathartic changes in systems or in life. So in many ways, it's a natural or a normal response to somebody making a new medical discovery that has the potential to fundamentally change a system. So it's just part of the natural change process we have to go through. Now we are 45 years past the inception of those medical discoveries. So my assessment of the situation is that it's now reached a point where the initial ridicule to these suggestions has passed, and maybe now it's time to reassess those findings and assess the merit or demerit in them.
You know, we look at the population of the US versus the amount of medications that the US is taking, and I was floored by that.
Yeah, I mean, where are we? What is America's 4 or 5% of the global population, and I think America consumes somewhere over 40% of the total pharmaceuticals produced in the world. So yeah, I mean, in terms of pharmaceutical drug consumption, America leads the world by a significant amount. And that's the problem, right? I mean, if you don't address the cause of a problem, then the problem keeps coming back. So you end up a lifetime on medication to suppress or to manage the symptoms of a problem, because you're not addressing the cause of it. But when you address the cause of that problem, then you no longer need the medications.
In your book, you talk about how pain has a biological purpose. I'd love for you to share about that with our listeners.
It does, and everybody can validate this for themselves. I'll give you so the purpose of pain is to stop us from using a part of the body so that it has the time, space, and energy to heal. It's like if you've got a puncture in your car tire, if you drive your car tire with a puncture, then obviously it's not going to do the car any good. So in the same way, if you cut your finger, and everybody can test this for themselves, if you cut your finger, when it swells up and starts healing, if you don't touch it, then you won't experience any pain. As soon as you start trying to use it, I don't know, you start washing the dishes, or even you put your hand under the shower, or you start trying to write with a finger that's cut. As soon as you start trying to use it, then it will start throbbing and it will become very painful. So what nature is trying to tell you is that this part of your body is temporarily broken, and what you need to do is not use it until it's fully repaired. And once it's fully repaired, then you'll be able to use it again without pain. So I put this I put this to the ultimate test. In 2019, I got cancer in my jaw, and it was triggered literally by a 5-second argument with my wife, which made it incredibly difficult for me to be able to identify the specific cause of this problem. So by the time I discovered the problem, it was more than a month or so. I don't remember exactly. But by the time there was a significant growth in my gum, and by the time I managed to switch off that cancer program, which is another discussion on its own, basically all of the teeth on my upper jaw on the left side of my mouth, during the course of both the tumor growing and the healing process, basically all of my teeth fell out, and I lost a part of my jaw. So I ended up having to have a 5-hour reconstructive surgery where I had a bone graft on my jaw. I had 35 stitches and implants basically to replace my teeth. And I had one painkiller at the time of the surgery, as I was leaving the surgery, and I took one more painkiller the evening before I slept. And then when I woke up next morning, I have experience of switching off pain that's caused by various different emotional traumas, but I didn't have experience of switching off pain that came essentially from a physical trauma. So I thought, okay, let me try and see if I can switch this pain off, because I'm not a big fan of taking painkillers, etc. So I was sitting there and I thought to myself, okay, what is the purpose of pain? The purpose of pain is to stop you from using a part of the body so that it has the time, space, and energy to heal. Okay, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, right, okay, I currently have no teeth on the left side of my mouth because they all fell out. So I can't chew on the left side of my mouth. So why don't I try switching off that pain so I don't have to take the painkillers? So I said to my, this is another discovery this medical doctor made, that you can use your conscious mind to overall these biological programs that run in your subconscious mind. So I had a discussion with my subconscious mind along these lines, and I said to my subconscious mind, I've just had a 5-hour surgery. I have no teeth on the left side of my mouth. I know that the purpose of pain is to ensure I don't use something so it has the time, space, and energy to heal. I have no teeth. I'm not going to chew on the left side of my mouth because I can't. So please, I'm not going to use that side of my mouth. Please switch off the pain. And bang, the pain just went doosh, gone. And then what happened during the course of events is, as I was eating, I made an error, and food would inadvertently end up on the side of my mouth where I had the surgery. And of course, as soon as that happened, it triggered the pain again to start again. So I'd get the huge throbbing in the side of my face. And I apologized to my subconscious mind. I said, sorry, subconscious mind, that was an error. Let's strike the deal again. I will not use that side of my mouth. Please switch off the pain. And the pain just switched off like a light switch. And I went through a 5-hour reconstructive surgery with 2 painkillers. I slept for 20 to 22 hours a day for 3 weeks. And then when I got up after 3 weeks, I went back to get the 35 stitches removed, and much the amazement of my doctor, my jaw had fully healed.
Well, what a great account that is. I think they'd give a lot of people encouragement. One question I have is, you said that all this came from an argument you had with your wife. How did you even come to that understanding that that's what was the root cause?
Oh, amazing, Marianne. So this German doctor he essentially unraveled the biological code. Okay, so what he has done is created something called the scientific chart of Germanic new medicine. And on this scientific chart, he has he's laid out exactly the type of problem in life that affects every area of our body, what biological changes happen to the body when we experience this life event, life crisis, life trauma. This doctor called these biological conflict shocks. How to resolve these conflicts and what happens. So if your capacity is increased when you go into conflict, in the same way his capacity was increased in his testicle in order to give him a better chance of getting his wife pregnant. And then how you resolved the conflict. And in his situation, if he had have known at the time, his resolution would have been to get his wife pregnant, because that was the purpose of the biological program. And then after you resolve the problem, how the extra capacity is then removed, and your capacity is returned back to normal. He's laid out this entire process for every part of the body. So every time you experience a pain or a discomfort or a change in your biology in some way, and it doesn't matter whether it's a runny nose, a sore throat, ulcers on your tongue, rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, anything you can think of, he's laid out the cause of the problem, what biological purpose this problem actually is there to help us to solve, and basically how to solve it and what to expect after you've solved it. It's quite extraordinary.
And for our listeners, you have no medical background. Is that correct?
No, I'm not a doctor. No, I'm a. Don't hold it against me, Marianne. But I trained in law in terms of my education, and I spent the first half of my career working in strategic management consulting, and the second half of my career working in asset management and venture capital. So I have absolutely no business or practice in medicine, either conventional or alternative.
So, what you're doing with us today in your book as well is just sharing the information that you've discovered along your path of healing.
Absolutely. Um, I mean, I experienced a trauma um, just under 20 years ago when a friend of mine was diagnosed with cancer, and I both funded her cancer treatment and did a pretty good job of ensuring her compliance to the treatment, which very sadly killed her quite quickly. And when that happened, I mean, at the time I thought I was doing the right thing. When that happened, I made a commitment that I would find a better solution to the problem, and I would search to the ends of the earth to find it. That all in all took me about 7 or 8 years of looking and studying various healing modalities before I discovered this German medical doctor's body of knowledge, a Germanic healing knowledge. And I've spent the last now 11 years studying this protocol, healing myself of everything you can imagine. And once I had sufficient conviction and confidence that this actually is the holy grail of health and wellness, then I helped other people, particularly cancer patients, and in many cases, people who had been given a terminal diagnosis. I've helped many of them to fully recover their health, even though I'm not a doctor.
Well, and I understand you've said that cancer research is a dangerous occupation. Why is that?
Well, it seems to be. I mean, in the journey over the last nearly 2 decades, I've come across there's a website in America called Health Nut News that follows the strange deaths of cancer researchers and alternative medical practitioners, and I've been following that for many years. And in my own life, I also have a friend of a friend who used to be a cancer researcher and basically was found in a field with a plastic bag over his head. So yeah, I mean, it's purely my. I guess, is it about the money? Is it about trying to maintain competitive advantage by ensuring that no other modality is able to surface? I mean, I don't know, right? Because I've never met the type of people who sort of carry out the type of assisted suicides and things that tends to be very common amongst cancer researchers and alternative practitioners. But yeah, it's very common for the people in the cancer research space to sort of shoot themselves in the head twice and be diagnosed as suicide.
In your book, you talk about how Dr. Hammer was prosecuted in Austria. And I'd love for you to share just that a little bit of that story and the survival rate that you discovered.
Okay, so in 1997 in Neustadt, Austria, Dr. Hammer was prosecuted many times, right? So he spent a total of about 2.5 years in prison. He also, I believe, had multiple attempts on his life, and I think they attempted to put him in a mental institution 75 times in the course of his lifetime. in Austria in 97. His medical license, I think, was taken away from him in 1986, and it was removed because he refused to prescribe chemotherapy. So he lost his medical license, but then he continued to help particularly terminal patients. But then he was prosecuted many times in Austria and Germany and France. And in 97, he was prosecuted for practicing medicine without a license. I think he was given 18 months in prison and served 12 months of that. But during the course of that prosecution, the prosecutor's office subpoenaed 6,500 of his patient records, and many, I think a high, I don't remember exact percentage, but many of those patients were given a terminal diagnosis before they approached Dr. Hummer for help. And the prosecutor called up all of his patients and discovered that over 6,000, which was over 90%, I think the actual number was about 92% of his patients were not only alive, but they were in full health. And these are many of these patients had been given a terminal diagnosis before they went to Dr. Hummer for his help. And then he was thrown in prison for practicing medicine without a license.
It seems that they would continuously, in many ways, subpoena records, go through them, and find these incredible survival rates.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine a situation where, over 90% of your patient records, and the prosecutor has to admit in court that over 90% of your previously primarily terminally ill cancer patients are not only alive, and this is like over a 10-year period, I think, that 6,500 patients were, I think, over a 10-year period, that over 92% of them are alive and in full health, and then you get thrown in prison for illegally practicing medicine because you've had your medical license taken away from you. I practice this modality, right? So, I mean, there's no medicine. I mean, you're not practicing medicine. You're practicing what we now call healing knowledge. So all you're essentially doing is learning how to connect adverse biological events that happen in people's lives and connecting those to the cause of that problem, which is something that's going on in their life that's triggered it. So you're not actually even using medicine. So how it could be defined as practicing medicine without a license in itself is very questionable.
Do you think that he was really prosecuted because, you mentioned a little bit before, maybe because of financial reasons with maybe pharmaceutical companies, or the traditional medical system isn't ready to make these kind of changes yet?
Well, the thing, I mean, I think this is primarily an issue, I think, with conventional medicine. I mean, Dr. Hummer, he was a traditional medical doctor. He estimated that when his medical discoveries are allowed to surface, that 95% of all of today's medical protocols and procedures will become obsolete, because if you learn to heal yourself, then you don't need a healthcare system in order to help you. Now, when he says 95% of all symptomatic treatments, I mean, that includes alternative symptomatic treatments as well as conventional. So I guess that in financial terms, I mean, that makes him a dangerous man.
I can see it would make looking at illness in a different light, where, wouldn't this be great where medication was not something that we would absolutely have to have. You wouldn't have to have a pill for a pill.
No, and I mean, and even in his later years, Dr. Hummer would never advocate in terms of never using medication. He would never advocate never using surgery. In certain situations, if there is, for example, a blockage in the intestinal tract that's been caused by a life problem, if the intestinal tract is blocked, then the surgery is absolutely critical. Otherwise, you'll die without it. So he was never of the school of thought that, you can't have any of this, that all of this needs to go. I mean, he was very balanced in his view of life. Very often you can use certain forms of medication in order to make the process of healing easier without being quite so extreme, reduce the inflammation, etc. But it has to be done in a balanced manner. So, and he never believed that this is wrong and this is right. He would always reinforce that unless you address the cause of the problem, you can just never solve it permanently. But I think that the most important finding that he made that really is worth thinking about is the fact that all of these biological programs, or all of the biological changes that we experience, are part of a survival biological program. Everything about what we do and experience is designed for our survival. It's no different to having, if you see an accident in a car, by putting your foot on the brake or the accelerator. I mean, these are the biological changes that happen to us for these types of reasons. Now, let's take another example. Let's look at mammary gland breast cancer. Okay, now, what is the purpose of a mammary gland? The purpose of a mammary gland is to produce milk. So the only time that a woman lactates is when she's nursing, when she's pregnant, or where she's just delivered and the child is breastfeeding. After the child stops breastfeeding, the lactation dries up and then she stops producing milk. Now, before our modern day society, the only tool a woman had in order to be able to nurse a sick family member basically was her breast. So the mammary gland, according to Dr. Hummer, gets triggered by what is called either a nest or a care conflict. So say you're walking down the street and you're not paying attention and your 5-year-old child pulls away from you and runs into the road and gets hit by a car and ends up in ICU. As soon as that happens, the woman will start feeling a lump in her breast. And that lump basically is there in order, nature is in the same way in Dr. Hummer's case, that his testicles were increased in size to help him become more fertile to reproduce. In a woman's case, the mammary gland is being reactivated in order to help her lactate, so she can offer a breast to her sick child, so she can nurse her child back to health again. And once the child is back to health again, that reactivation of the mammary glands will be then switched off again, and that capacity will be removed by something we know today as TB microbacteria and fungi. Now, today we call that mammary gland breast cancer, and we remove women's breasts, etc., and give them chemotherapy and radiation because we think that that's a disease, and it's not. Again, it's just another survival function. The problem is we just don't understand how it works.
I understand that Dr. Hammer also had some postdoctoral thesis that he had been working on from the university he graduated medical school from. What happened with that?
So when after he recovered from when he got a cancer diagnosis, so he had a cancer diagnosis of the testicle and the stomach, and he was given a 1% chance to survive. He miraculously survived, and he survived because he only had surgery. He didn't have chemotherapy or radiation. So when he returned, at the time he was the head of the gynecological oncology unit at Tübingen University, and he was working with 200 female confirmed cancer patients. And what he wanted to do was to see whether they had gone through a similar life event, emotional trauma, life crisis that he had. And out of 200 had. And when he started putting the women into separate categories, the women with ovarian cancer or breast cancer or cervical cancer, etc., what he observed is that the women in the same category had all suffered from the same type of emotional crisis in their life. So, for example, all the women with ovarian cancer had all suffered from some type of profound loss. So he created, ultimately, once he started to piece all of this together, he created this postdoctoral thesis and he presented it to the university. Now, in Germany, Germans are very structured and systematic. And in Germany, if any postdoctoral thesis has to be proved or disproved by law by the university. And in this particular case, when Dr. Hammer presented his thesis for assessment to Tübingen University, which is basically an associate of Munich University, they refused to assess his findings. So Dr. Hammer took them to court, and in actual fact, they said to him at the time that they gave him two choices. They gave him a choice of either retracting his thesis findings, or they would fire him. So he refused to retract his findings, so he was fired. He took the university to court, and the court there was a court order against the university forcing them to assess these medical discoveries that Dr. Hammer had made. And still, even with the court order, the university said we're not going to assess these findings. And when the court asked why, basically the university said we do not want to know whether Dr. Hammer is right or not. So they agreed to pay a fine for not assessing his postdoctoral thesis, and then his thesis was sort of swept under the carpet.
That story reminds me so much of Galileo and the Earth moving from the idea of being flat to round.
Same as a surgeon, right? Who suggested that it was a good idea to wash your hands before you went into surgery. I mean, yeah, I mean, if you research back into medical history, you'll find these type of cases aplenty. I don't think that Dr. Hammer's case is rare in that he was vilified and suppressed, etc. I mean, I think that this happens that every time there was some major breakthrough or discovery, not only in medicine, but I think in all walks of life. So he experienced that treatment. But I say now we're a long way past that, and Dr. Hammer has now sadly passed away in 2017. And I think it's now time to reassess his medical findings to see the merit or demerit in them.
So what is your intent with, I know this is the first book of a series. What are you intending to do?
So the big challenge here, Marianne, is I've spent the last 10 years studying Dr. Hammer's medical discoveries, and it takes considerable application of mind. The problem is that I see is that the vast majority of the population will never put the time, effort, or energy in that would be required to study these medical discoveries in their current form. Now, what I am going to attempt to do is I've just written my flagship book, which is titled "Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis." And that's currently up on Amazon. This is essentially an introduction to Dr. Hammer's medical discoveries. Now, if you look at life, in life, we experience typically one or two problems, and we want a simple solution as far as possible to one or two problems. So what I am now planning to do is I'm planning to write a 500 plus book series, which is essentially one book on every disease or illness known to man. So one book on breast cancer, one on testicular cancer, one on lung cancer, one on brain cancer, yada, 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 Parkinson's, etc., etc., etc. So that, and all of these books will be written in lay language so that anybody with no prior knowledge of the subject can read, understand, and absorb the content, so that when you have one problem, you pick up one book and you can solve one problem. You understand the cause of the problem. You understand the biological purpose of the program. You can look at your life. There are lots of case studies, so you can see practically how that applies in your life. You then go through, and it gives you a chance to be able to solve the problem by addressing the cause of it. I've currently written 4 of those books, one on breast cancer, one on testicular cancer, one on IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, and ulcerative colitis, and one on atopic dermatitis, which actually includes many other skin issues, including vitiligo and eczema, psoriasis, chicken pox, measles, and many other skin-related conditions that are all actually triggered by the same problem. So I've done 4 so far, so that leaves approximately 496 more to go. I'll be writing 12 books a year, and I will try and prioritize them to address the biggest health challenges we face first. And then over the next many years, I will continue to write those books so that the medical discoveries become increasingly accessible to anybody, regardless of whether they have prior knowledge of the subject or not.
I understand your book is available on Amazon and it's flying off the shelves wherever it's at. And I know, congratulations on it being #1 in so many categories. I think people are really curious and have a hunger for this type of information.
I'm honestly, Marianne, I mean, I'm humbled. I've never written or published a book before. It's been an extraordinary team effort. I've had inputs into the book from hundreds and hundreds of people who have helped me, including specialists. Every chapter has had a specialist that's given input in some form. So it's not only my effort; it's literally the combined effort of hundreds of people. But yeah, I'm shocked I'm delighted by the response. I mean, the speed that it's hit bestsellers at and garnering sales and reviews. I mean, I couldn't be more delighted. I hope that Dr. Hummer is sort of looking down on us and he's sitting with a smile on his face at this point in time.
So, Danny, where can readers and our listeners learn more about your work and be part of your community?
Okay. My home website is danny-carroll.com, and my surname is the Irish spelling. It's CARROLL. So danny-carroll.com is my home website. On my website, I put a number of interesting things. I put a resource page on the website that is essentially the outcome of nearly 20 years of research. So I've put all of the key resources to help you to guide your way around the Germanic healing knowledge community, so that you know exactly where to look to go and find the scientific chart, or if you want training or you want free resources, they're all available there on my resource page. The books that I've written, they're under the brand called the Healing Tribune. All of the books will be available to read for free on my website. So the book on IBS, ulcerative colitis, testicular cancer, atopic dermatitis and breast cancer are all up on my website and can be read for free. And all 500 books will be available to read for free on my website. I do not want the lack of financial resource being in the way of somebody getting access to this potentially life-saving information. So all books will be up there on my website. And if you so desire, you can sign up to my website and I will be writing one more book a month. So if you want to sign up and join me on the journey, I will send out a newsletter every month to inform everybody of the new book that's been posted. And every month I'll add a new book up there until I'm still on this earth.
Well, it sounds like you have some work ahead of you here. So.
I have some work, Marianne.
Well, Danny, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Thank you so much for hosting me, Marianne. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, thank you, Danny. It has been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis. Discover a palliative care alternative medicine that you can survive. Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis by Danny Carroll has just been awarded the #1 Amazon International Bestseller. Make sure to drop by Amazon and purchase your copy today. Make sure to visit Danny's website at danny-carroll.com for more information and to be part of his community. If you're struggling with feelings of suicide, make sure to visit the Suicide Crisis Lifeline. In the U.S., that number is 988. Please note, this interview is not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, counseling, or professional services of any kind. This program is not meant to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease, and individuals with health problems should always consult their healthcare provider. This show holds no responsibility for the validity or accuracy of the information shared on the show, and is for informational purposes only. On that note, we are going to pause here for a quick break, and we'll be right back after this message.
The book Terminal Cancer is a Misdiagnosis, authored by Danny Carroll, is on sale at Amazon now. Licensed psychologist and psychotherapist Tessa Antia-John-Guerra commented, "This is one of the most empowering books on the topic of cancer you will ever read." Award-winning author T.L. Needham commented, "This recommended book can be understood by anyone seeking answers, hope, and alternatives to a terminal diagnosis. Buy it now on Amazon.com.
Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.